For good or bad, Covid-19 has changed the way we navigate the world. It is also redrawing the boundaries of our world and our freedoms and altering the playing field faster than we can keep up. Owing in large part to the US government's deep-seated and in many cases top-secret alliances with foreign nations and global corporations and globalists, it has become increasingly obvious that we have entered into a new world order, a global world order made up of the elitists, the philanthropists, international governments, the banking cabal, international farmers and the corporations. This powerful international cabal, let's call it the deep state, is just as real as a corporatized, militarized, industrialized international deep state, and it poses just as great a threat to our rights as individuals under the UN Constitution and Charter, if not greater. We've been inching closer to the global world order for the past several decades, but Covid-19, which has seen governmental and corporate interests become even more closely intertwined, has shifted this transformation into high gear with global capitalism and fascism at its command. Fascism has become a global menace. It remains unclear whether the international deep state, a global and national security apparatus that holds sway even over the elected leaders notionally in charge of it, answers to the global deep state, or whether the global deep state merely empowers the international deep state. However, there is no denying the extent to which they are intricately and symbiotically involved and interlocked. Consider the extent to which our lives and liberties are impacted by this international convergence of governmental and profit-driven corporate interests in the surveillance state, the military-industrial complex, the private prison industry, the intelligence sector, the security sector, the technology sector, the telecommunications sector, the transportation sector, the pharmaceutical industry, and most recently by the pharmaceutical health sector. All of these sectors are dominated by megacorporations operating on a global scale and working through government channels to increase their profit margins. The profit-driven policies of these global corporate giants influence everything from legislative policies to economics, trade and development, war to environmental issues to healthcare.
I want to thank Bill and the employees here at the printers for sharing with me their thoughts on. We take the continuity of government issue very seriously because our nation was under attack. And I still take the threats that we receive from Al-Qaeda killers and terrorists very seriously. I have an obligation as the president, and my administration has an obligation to the American people to put measures in place that should somebody be successful in an attack in Washington, D.C., there's an ongoing government. That's one reason why the vice president was going to undisclosed locations. This is serious business, and we take it seriously. Yes.
It looks like some of the documents are going to be released. Are you concerned?
That's fine with me.
Are you concerned?
We take every threat seriously. And until this country has routed out terrorists wherever they try to hide, we're not safe. But I will tell you, there are people still in this world who want to harm America. And we're going to chase them down. And it's going to take a while. But I'm a determined person. And as I told the American people, I'm not going to relent. I believe we've been called to history to lead the world. I believe this great, strong, compassionate country has been given a unique moment. And I'm not going to miss the moment. I want to, as far as Yemen goes, Yemen is a country that I've had a very good discussion with the president of Yemen. I made it clear to him, as well as other presidents of nations, that you're either with us or you're not with us. And that if you're with us, we expect results. I don't know if you remember my speech to the United Nations where I said, thanks for all the condolences and flowers, now's the time for action. That if you're part of our coalition, we expect you to work diligently and work hard to arrest Al-Qaeda killers and Al-Qaeda members or people who aid and abet Al-Qaeda, and the Yemen government is responding.
Attack by Al-Qaeda, is that something?
The Covid-19 pandemic has propelled us into a whole new global frontier. Those hoping to navigate this interconnected and highly technological world of contact tracing, vaccine passports and digital passes will find themselves grappling with issues that touch on deep-seated moral, political, religious and personal questions for which there may be no clear-cut answers. We are about to find our ability to access, engage and move about in the world dependent on which camp we fall into, those who have been vaccinated against Covid-19 and those who have not. It is the latest status symbol. Flash it at the people and you can get access to concerts, sports arenas, cinemas, hospitality, leisure or long forbidden restaurant tables. Someday it may even help you cross a border without having to quarantine, writes Heather Murphy for the New York Times. The new platinum card of the COVID age is a vaccine certificate. This is what MIT professor Ramesh Raska refers to as the new currency for health, an apt moniker given the potential lucrative role that big business, big pharma and big tech especially will play in establishing this pay-to-play marketplace. The airline industry has been working on a travel pass, IBM is developing a digital health pass, and the US government has been all too happy to allow the corporate sector to take the lead. Spearheaded by the National Security Agency NSA, which has shown itself to care little for constitutional limits or privacy, the surveillance state has come to dominate our government and our lives. Yet the government does not operate alone, it cannot. It requires an accomplice. Thus, the increasingly complex security needs of our governments, especially in the areas of defense, surveillance, privacy, social interactions and data management, have been met within the corporate sector, which has shown itself to be a powerful ally that both depends on and feeds the growth of governmental bureaucracy. Take AT&T for instance. Through its vast telecommunications network that crisscrosses the globe, AT&T provides the US government with the complex infrastructure it needs for its mass surveillance programs, according to The Intercept. The NSA considers AT&T to be one of its most trusted partners and has lauded the company's extreme willingness to help. It is a collaboration that dates back decades. Little known, however, is that its scope is not restricted to AT&T's customers. According to the NSA's documents, it values AT&T not only because it has access to information that transits the nation, but also because it maintains unique relationships with other phone and internet providers. The NSA exploits these relationships for surveillance purposes, commandeering AT&T's massive infrastructure and using it as a platform to covertly tap into communications processed by other companies. Now magnify what the US government is doing through AT&T on a global scale, and you have the 14 Eyes program, also referred to as the Signet Seniors. This global spy agency is made up of members from around the world: United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, France, Netherlands, Norway, Germany, Belgium, Italy, Sweden, Spain, Israel, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, India and all British overseas territories. Surveillance is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these global alliances. War has become a huge money-making venture, and America or the UN, with its vast military empire, and its incestuous relationship with a host of international defense contractors. DARPA is one of its biggest buyers and sellers. The American military-industrial complex has erected an empire unsurpassed in history in its breadth and scope, one dedicated to conducting perpetual warfare throughout the earth. For example, while erecting a security surveillance state in the US, the military-industrial complex has perpetuated a worldwide military empire directed by the UN, with American troops sanctioned in 177 countries. That's over 70% of the countries worldwide through NATO. Although the federal government obscures so much about its defense spending that accurate figures are difficult to procure, we do know that since 2001, the US government has spent more than $1.8 trillion in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's $8.3 million per hour. That doesn't include wars and military exercises waged around the globe, which are expected to push the total bill upwards of $12 trillion by 2053. The illicit merger of the global armaments industry and the Pentagon that President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us against more than 50 years ago has come to represent perhaps the greatest threat to the nation's fragile infrastructure today. America's expanding military empire is bleeding the country dry at a rate of more than $15 billion a month, or $12 million an hour, and that's just what the government spends on foreign wars. That does not include the cost of maintaining and staffing the 1,000 plus US military bases spread around the globe. Incredibly, although the US constitutes only 5% of the world's population, America boasts almost 50% of the world's total military expenditure, spending more on the military than the next 19 biggest spending nations combined. In fact, the Pentagon spends more on war than all 50 states combined spend on health, education, welfare and safety. There's a good reason why bloated, corrupt and inefficient are among the words most commonly applied to the government, especially the Department of Defense and its contractors. Prize gouging has become an accepted form of corruption within the American military empire. It's not just the American economy that is being gouged. Unfortunately, driven by a greedy defense sector, the American homeland has been transformed into a battlefield, with militarized police and weapons better suited to a war zone. President Biden, marching in lockstep with his predecessors, has continued to expand America's military empire abroad and domestically in a clear bid to pander to the powerful money interests, military, corporate and security that run the deep state and hold the government in its clutches. Glance at pictures of international police forces and you will have a hard time distinguishing between American police and those belonging to other nations. There's a reason they all look alike, garbed in the militarized, weaponized uniform of a standing army. There's a reason why they act alike too and speak a common language of force. They belong to a global police force, a one world army. For example, Israel, one of America's closest international allies and one of the primary yearly recipients of more than $3 billion in US foreign military aid, has been at the forefront of a little publicized exchange program aimed at training American police to act as occupying forces in the communities. As The Intercept sums it up, American police are essentially taking lessons from agencies that enforce military rule rather than civil law. This idea of global policing is reinforced by the Strong Cities Network program, which trains local police agencies across America in how to identify, fight and prevent extremism, as well as address intolerance within the communities, using all of the resources at their disposal. The cities included in the global network include New York City, Atlanta, Denver, Minneapolis, Paris, London, Montreal, Beirut and Oslo. The objective is to prevent violent extremism by targeting its source, racism, bigotry, hatred, intolerance, etc. In other words, police acting as extensions of the United Nations will identify, monitor and deter individuals who exhibit, express or engage in anything that could be construed as extremist. Of course, the concern with the government's anti-extremism program is that it will in many cases be utilized to render otherwise lawful, non-violent activities as potential extremist. Keep in mind that the government agencies involved in ferreting out extremists will carry out their objectives to identify and deter potential extremists in concert with fusion centers, of which there are 78 nationwide, with partners in the private sector and globally, data collection agencies, behavioral scientists, corporations, social media and community organizers, and by relying on cutting-edge technology for surveillance, facial recognition, predictive policing, biometrics and behavioral epigenetics, in which life experiences alter one's genetic makeup. This is pre-crime on an ideological scale, and it's been a long time coming. Are you starting to get the picture now? On almost every front, whether it's the war on drugs or the sale of weapons or regulating immigration or establishing prisons or advancing technology or fighting a pandemic, if there is a profit to be made and power to be amassed, you can bet that the government and its global partners have already struck a deal that puts the people on the losing end of the bargain. We've been losing our freedoms so incrementally for so long, sold to us in the name of national security and global peace, maintained by way of martial law disguised as law and order, and enforced by a standing army of militarized police and a political elite determined to maintain their powers at all costs, that it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it all started going downhill, but we're certainly on the downward trajectory now, and things are moving fast. The government of the people, by the people, for the people has perished. In its place is a shadow government, a corporatized, militarized, entrenched global bureaucracy that is fully operational and running their countries. Given the trajectory and dramatic expansion, globalization and merger of governmental and corporate powers, we're not going to recognize our countries 20 years from now. It's taken less than a generation for our freedoms to be eroded and the global deep state's structure to be erected, expanded and entrenched. Our governments will not save us from the chains of the global deep state. Now there are those who will tell you that any mention of a New World Order government, a power elite conspiring to rule the world, is the stuff of conspiracy theories. Indeed, they are stupendously misinformed. I am not one of those skeptics. I wholeheartedly believe that one should always mistrust those in power, take alarm at the first encroachment on one's liberties, and establish powerful constitutional checks against government mischief and abuse. We can also attest to the fact that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We understand that governments and international institutions, the US government being no exception, are at times indistinguishable from the evil they claim to be fighting, whether that evil takes the form of terrorism, torture, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, murder, violence, theft, pornography, scientific experimentations, or some other diabolical means of inflicting pain, suffering and servitude on humanity. Many so-called conspiracy theories turn into cold, hard facts, thus comprising of the foretold, the Antichrist system, and the New World Order, or the One World Order. Remember, people used to scoff at the notion of a deep state, aka a shadow government. They used to doubt that fascism could ever take hold in America or the world, and sneer at any suggestion that the United States was starting to resemble Nazi Germany in the years leading up to Hitler's rise to power.